Morning, PathoPhys. I posted an assignment last night, and it's meant to be a short assignment. It's meant to get you thinking, if you haven't done your project yet, about exactly how the skeletal system functions. The skeletal system, one that we typically would spend a couple weeks on in class discussing in lecture before you did your project, so I feel kind of bad. Going to short sell it a little bit, but behind me is a kind of brief summary of what it does and a few disorders that are related to those functions. There are many of those. I could have a huge board here and list those, but I wanted to give a few brief ones. I'm not going to spend any great deal of time talking about the disorders. I'm hoping that a few of you will pick some of these, and you're more than welcome to do so if you haven't started yet. Remember, that project is due on Wednesday evening, 11:59, I guess, is the cutoff time for Google Classroom. Hopefully you'll have it done before then. That is going to form the majority of your assessment for this chapter. There will be a short test, if you want to call it that, on Friday. I'll have something put together and maybe even try to download an old version of a test that I typically would give in class for you to look at. There are, like I said, a lot of things that I will not be able to cover in these videos that I typically would discuss with you in class. A lot of those things are just kind of spur of the moment based on your questions, which unfortunately I don't have. And again, feel free to ask those via email or Google Classroom, and I'll address those for the entire group. Just to start off real quickly, the skeletal system does 5 basic things. It supports the body. It allows for movement. Obviously, with the muscular system, the skeletal system doesn't move on its own, and it protects a lot of soft organs like the brain, the lungs, and the heart. Storage, calcium and lipids. It's a very important function. Calcium, as we've talked about before, is necessary for muscular function and other functions in the body as well. So calcium is an important mineral, an important ion for the body's physiology. And then hematopoiesis, which we talked about a little bit before, which is blood cell formation, which isn't necessarily related to skeletal function, but it is housed, this whole process is housed within the long bones and the hollow bones like the jaw, the femur, the humerus. Any long bone that has marrow in it is going to be performing hematopoiesis, producing blood cells. So when we look across the board, and this is the relationship I want you guys to make, basically what you're looking at are disorders that are related to these functions. So when these functions are out of whack, so to speak, disruption of homeostasis, then you can have some of these disorders on the other side of the board. For support, I wrote a few things down. Osteoporosis, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. That is a decalcification of the bone matrix that occurs. There's a lot of underlying reasons, and it's not quite, the disease is as common as it is somewhat poorly understood, but basically the calcium is pulled out of the bone matrix quicker than it can be replaced. It's more common in women than men. Osteomalacia, which is commonly called rickets. That's a disease of malnutrition. And osteogenesis imperfecta, which is a disease in which the collagen or the protein matrix of the bone structure is improperly formed, makes the bones brittle. If any of you watched the show The Middle, Brick, the actor who plays Brick has OI, or osteogenesis imperfecta. And again, if you haven't picked a disorder yet, that'd be a neat one to do. It really discusses a lot of different things, from genetic issues, skeletal malformations, protein dysfunction. So it's a good disease to look at. When we look at movement, there are many things we can talk about. Obviously, the skeleton, if it's not properly functioning, is going to impede movement. That could be due to muscular attachment, it could be due to injury, and then we could talk about diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disorder, which will be your next project, by the way. Autoimmune disorders. And rheumatoid arthritis, what we have occurring is an inflammation at the joint level, and obviously that's going to impede movement. It's like any other arthritis where we have bone-on-bone contact. It attacks the connective tissue around the joints. With protection, osteopetrosis, it's not osteoporosis. Osteopetrosis is a hypercalcification of the skeleton, which sounds like, in essence, a good thing, like more protection, but actually it's not a good thing, because that hypercalcification causes the bones to become very brittle. I don't know if that came up on the video or not. My screen just went blank. So I'll repeat that. Osteopetrosis causes the calcified matrix to become hypercalcified, and that causes the bones to become brittle. It's a balance. Again, it's that homeostasis where, too much sometimes is a bad thing as well. Too much calcium in the skeleton can cause the bones to become overgrown and brittle. For storage, calcium and lipids, these are really neat disorders, and if somebody really wants to dig into renal function, which I'm hoping to get to with you, even if we're going to do it in the format of online classroom, renal osteodystrophy, hyperparathyroidism, and Paget's disorder are all diseases in which calcium is not properly stored in the bone matrix. And again, it comes back to the things: it's too much, too little. Either way, it's going to cause the skeleton to become too brittle. It can also cause other issues in the body. If we can't balance the calcium, then too much calcium can cause issues with skeletal muscle contraction and cardiac muscle contraction as well. It could be life-threatening. So again, 3 good diseases to look at if you want to kind of really see multiple systems affected by skeletal function or lack of function. And then the last category, hematopoiesis, obviously blood cell formation, which I discussed earlier. With hematopoiesis, if we're having issues with that, whether we're making too many blood cells, too few blood cells, there are typically some underlying causes, and those a lot of times, unfortunately, are blood cell cancers, leukemias, and many of those that we have not talked about yet. We'll get to those in subsequent chapters. I'll spend some time discussing those with you, giving you some questions about those. But blood cell cancers, obviously an issue related to hematopoiesis. So what I would really want you to do over the next few days, once you finish your project, if your project is already done, start looking into those notes for Chapter 7. Find some things in there that maybe you would like me to discuss further, maybe pose some questions. And we could discuss those in any of a number of different formats. I'm actually exploring looking at opening up office hours where I'll be available via video conference. Again, something to look into, and something that as this evolves, and again, hopefully not too prolonged, we'll have the ability at least to communicate with each other. So again, if you have any questions, Google Classroom, email. Projects are going to be due on Wednesday evening, and I really would like to see some nice projects. So pick something you're interested in if you haven't already. And again, there's still time. You have a few days to change your mind. If you've already picked a project, something you'd rather do, something you've thought of. And again, enjoy this. Do the best you can to do some learning during this time and get yourself ready for next year. All right, have a good day.